A single gunshot tears through the night, echoing off metal and rain. Lightning flares, revealing a black SUV crumpled in a roadside ditch, its body pocked with bullet holes. The storm hammers down as if trying to wash away the sins committed under its cover. Inside a nearby garage, light flickers on dull concrete, an island of tense calm amidst thunder that rattles the walls. Shadows loom, shaped by secrets too heavy to bear in the quiet. Footsteps splash across pooling water, quick and desperate. Someone's out there breathing ragged, clutching something far more dangerous than a weapon truth. Beyond the sheets of rain, a pair of cold, watchful eyes track every move, ready to pull the trigger if things don't go their way. And in that charged, rain-soaked darkness, a choice stands poised between survival and betrayal, one that will upend more than just a single life. Jack Morgan was used to the quiet, but tonight, the storm felt personal. Rain pounded down on the tin roof of his garage in Brent Hollow, a small town in upstate New York that always seemed stuck somewhere between the last century and a persistent dream of the next. At 55, Jack had seen enough of life to know that storms came and went. Yet he couldn't shake the prickling sense that this one would leave a mark. A former Marine, he prided himself on composure. Even the relentless thunder crashing like artillery overhead didn't rattle him. He stood by the open bay door, arms crossed, letting the cold wind whip across his face. The fluorescent lights hummed behind him, reflecting off the slick concrete floor. Tools were scattered from his late-night tinkering with an old Ford pickup. Brent Hollow had been his home since his discharge almost 3 decades back, a place he'd chosen with his late wife to start fresh. After she passed from cancer 6 years ago, he stayed behind, clinging to the memories they had woven into these streets, sometimes out of love, sometimes out of sheer inertia. Usually by this hour, he'd be at home, checking receipts for the day's repairs, maybe microwaving a frozen dinner before turning in. But a bad feeling had gnawed at him all afternoon, telling him not to lock up early. He couldn't explain why. It was just a sense honed from years in the service, that old intangible alert that told him something, or someone, was heading his way. Outside, the street was empty. Most folks had taken shelter or driven off to bigger towns. Brent Hollow's population was barely 1,500. On any normal night, you wouldn't see more than a raccoon or two. Tonight, though, that feeling in his gut kept him scanning the dark horizon. Suddenly, headlights cut across the sheets of rain. The silhouette of a car emerged at the end of the block, engine whining. Then, just as quickly, the headlights veered off, like the driver had lost control or was trying to avoid something in the road. Jack heard a screech metal grinding on asphalt and his heart kicked up a notch. Grabbing a flashlight from the tool bench, he sprinted out into the downpour. The storm battered him instantly, water sluicing into his eyes and soaking through his work shirt. As he jogged down the road, he half expected a drunk driver or some teenager messing around. But what he found was far more unsettling: a sleek black SUV jammed into the ditch. Passenger door flung open, and no sign of anyone behind the wheel. Steam rose from the hood. The driver's seat was empty. Just then, movement caught his eye, someone huddled in the shadows across the road. He aimed the flashlight, calling out, "Hey, you all right?" Over the pounding rain, he could barely hear the ragged breathing. The figure turned. A woman, drenched to the bone, eyes wide and wild. She stumbled forward, and in that instant, Jack Morgan knew his ordinary life was about to unravel in ways he never could have anticipated. The woman nearly collapsed against the lamppost, her coat clinging to her like a soaked tarp. Jack rushed over, hooking an arm under her shoulder before she could hit the ground. Even through the pouring rain, he could feel her trembling. She looked up with a flash of desperation in her eyes, which struck him more than her elegant features. She was no typical hitchhiker. Something about her screamed running, and not from anything trivial. Jack had seen that same look in fellow Marines after a firefight, the mixture of terror and determination that meant something big had just gone wrong. "Ma'am," he said gently, "my garage is just up the road. We can get you warm." She shook her head, her gaze darting back to the black SUV. The front grille was half submerged in the ditch, water swirling around the tires. Jack's chest tightened. He glimpsed bullet holes peppering the fender. This wasn't just a skid-off. Someone had shot at that vehicle. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. Storm or not, this situation was clearly dangerous. He guided her carefully to her feet. She resisted at first, fear overshadowing trust, but her knees threatened to buckle. Eventually, she relented, leaning into him for support. They made their way back to the garage under the relentless deluge. Jack's mind raced. Should he call the sheriff? Brent Hollow's law enforcement resources were minimal: one sheriff, two deputies, and no rapid response for anything resembling big city crime. Yet if there were bullets involved, it was beyond a simple fender bender. He was torn between helping this stranger and ensuring neither of them got caught in crossfire. Arriving at the garage, he guided her inside, shutting the overhead door against the howling wind. Fluorescent light revealed the woman's disheveled state hair plastered to her face, coat streaked with mud. Her eyes never stopped scanning the windows, as if expecting someone to barge in at any second. "Name's Jack Morgan," he said, grabbing a towel from a workbench. She hesitated, then breathed. "Claire." She coughed, the name rattling in her chest. "Claire." "Kane," she added, pausing just long enough that Jack noticed. The name felt improvised. He decided not to press, at least not yet. He draped the towel around her shoulders and rolled out a swivel stool so she could sit. With the overhead door down, the storm outside sounded like 1,000 rocks pelting the metal roof. "You hurt?" he asked, scanning for visible wounds. She shook her head, shivering too hard to speak. He noticed faint bruising on her left wrist, barely concealed by the drenched coat sleeve, possibly from a struggle. He crouched beside her. "Claire, can you tell me what happened?" She licked her lips, swallowing. "Ran. Had to run." She managed. Her gaze darted around the garage, lingering momentarily on a half-rebuilt engine. "They tried to." She swallowed again. "They tried to take me." Jack suppressed a surge of anger, pushing aside the question of who they were. A protective instinct flared inside him, one he hadn't felt in years, not since losing his wife. "You're safe here," he said, though part of him wondered if that was true. "No one's coming in without me hearing." She nodded numbly, but the fear in her eyes didn't ease. Jack handed her a water bottle, forging a silent promise to keep her from whatever nightmare chased her into his path. The overhead lights flickered, threatening to plunge them into darkness, but they held. Jack stood and surveyed his surroundings. The garage was modest but functional: 2 bays, a stack of tires in the corner, and a small office partition with a coffee machine. He flicked the coffee maker on, though the power wasn't guaranteed in this storm. "Sit tight," he told Claire. "Let's see if I can get you something warm." Inside the office, he rummaged through a cardboard box that held leftover clothes from donation drives: oil-stained t-shirts, sweatshirts that had seen better days. He found a large sweatshirt that might suffice. Holding it up, he hesitated. This was his wife's old sweatshirt, the logo half faded. He exhaled slowly, memories flaring of a time before cancer took her. "Better than nothing," he muttered, tucking it under his arm. He pulled a battered first aid kit from the supply cabinet. Might as well check for injuries properly. Returning to the main garage area, he saw Claire slumped forward, head in her hands. She looked up, eyes rimmed with tears she refused to let fall. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I shouldn't drag you into this." Jack shook his head. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I came on my own." He offered the sweatshirt and placed the first aid kit on a nearby tool cart. "Why don't you change out of that soaked coat bathrooms over there?" he said, pointing to a narrow hallway. "You can dry off." Claire seemed to gather herself, nodding in gratitude. She disappeared into the small bathroom. While she was gone, Jack debated his next move. Normally, he'd call the sheriff's office, but something told him if whoever was chasing her was armed. Brent Hollow's law enforcement might not be equipped for a firefight. Besides, if Claire was telling the truth, someone had tried to take her, This might be bigger than a small-town deputy could handle. He decided to wait and see how coherent her story would be once she was calmer. A crack of thunder shook the building. In the corner, a dusty radio perched on a shelf. Jack snapped it on. The local station was mostly static, an occasional snippet of old country music slipping through. No mention of any gunshots or pursuit. He flipped the dial, hoping for a weather update. A male voice crackled. Flash flood warnings in effect for the next 12 hours. Residents are advised to stay indoors. Then static again. Jack turned it off, frustration bubbling in his chest. It meant if more trouble was on the way, they were effectively cut off from help. Claire emerged in the oversized sweatshirt, her coat folded over one arm. The bruises on her wrist stood out starkly. "Thank you," she said, glancing at the coffee machine that had managed a half pot of steaming brew. Jack poured her a cup. She took it with trembling hands. The air was thick with unasked questions. Who was after her? Why were there bullets in her SUV? Could it be criminals? Or something else entirely? Jack wanted answers. But one look at Claire's haunted expression told him to tread gently. She was like a cornered animal right now. "We'll figure this out," he said softly, though he hardly believed his own assurance. Outside, the storm raged, an ominous soundtrack to the secrets that had just blown into his life. For a few minutes, they simply sipped coffee in tense silence. The overhead fluorescent hum and the drumming rain acted like white noise, cushioning them from the questions swirling around. Jack watched Claire's expression shift as she stared at the garage floor. Finally, she looked up, eyes flickering with a kind of weary determination. "I'm not who I said I am," she began, her voice still quivering. "My name is Claire Whitmore." Jack's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "I was supposed to become CEO of my family's company, Whitmore Logistics. We run shipping, transport, all sorts of global deals." She paused, swallowing. "But I found out things weren't clean. My father made an arrangement with someone. I didn't know the details, only that I was expected to sign off on certain documents once I took over. When I refused, everything fell apart." She took a shuddering breath, setting the coffee cup on the tool cart. "I overheard conversations I shouldn't have. My fiancé, ex-fiancé now, and my father were plotting to consolidate shares, remove me from real power, but still use my name as a front for some questionable deals. They were locking me out. So, I ran. That black SUV outside wasn't my first run-in. There were men tailing me for days." She lowered her gaze, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They cornered me on this road, tried to force me off. I lost control and crashed." Jack said nothing for a moment, absorbing her words. It was a staggering revelation. Whitmore Logistics was huge. He'd seen their shipping trucks on highways, heard the name on finance radio segments. Could this woman, trembling in a greasy sweatshirt, truly be an heiress entangled in corporate backstabbing? He exhaled slowly. "That's a lot to take in." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You sure you're not hurt? Nothing broken?" She shook her head. "Just shaken." A flash of lightning illuminated her features, revealing the raw vulnerability there. "I didn't want to lie to you, but I panicked. I didn't know if you'd hand me over." Jack studied her face. "Well, for now, let's assume no one knows you're here. That SUV is done for. We'll figure out how to handle it come morning." Another rumble of thunder punctuated his words. "If they come looking, we'll deal with that, too." Claire's lips parted, like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. The relief in her eyes was telling. Jack didn't blame her. She was a stranger, but he wasn't about to throw her to the wolves, not when she was clearly in danger. "Come on," he said, tipping his head toward a small set of stairs behind the office. "I got a cot upstairs. It's not exactly the Ritz, but it's dry." They climbed the narrow staircase, the bare bulb overhead flickering. The loft area above the garage was mostly storage boxes of old parts, battered shelves. In one corner, a rickety cot lay folded. Jack snapped it open, retrieving a spare blanket from a trunk. "It's no honeymoon suite," he murmured. Offering a lopsided grin, Claire managed a faint smile in return. "Jack," she said, voice quiet, "thank you." He gave a curt nod and moved to descend the stairs. "Lock the door behind me. Try to rest." He didn't mention the loaded shotgun he kept under the workbench. For now, knowledge of that was his alone. One thing was sure: trouble had found them, and they needed to be ready for the next knock on the door. Downstairs, the garage felt eerily still, punctuated only by the rhythmic beat of rain. Jack sank into a creaky metal chair, letting out a long breath. His mind was a tangle of Marine training, paternal instincts, and the dull ache of old grief. Part of him wanted to phone the sheriff, though he doubted the response time in a storm like this would be swift. The more pressing question was whether the local authorities could handle a corporate fiasco involving potential gunmen. He pulled out his cell phone, a basic flip model he'd never bothered upgrading. The screen displayed no service, typical in this weather. Even the landline in his office might be down. With a grunt, he stood and checked the garage doors, making sure they were locked. Then he gathered tools that could double as defensive weapons: an iron crowbar, a hefty torque wrench. He wasn't paranoid, just cautious. In the Marines, they called it situational readiness. He called it surviving. Fatigue crept over him. The day had been long before this storm of events. He grabbed the old army blanket from a supply cabinet, threw it onto a spare creeper bed near the office, and laid down. Sleep wouldn't come easily, but he closed his eyes, letting the rain lull him into a light doze. Flickers of memory danced behind his eyelids. His wife, Linda, laughing as she helped him repaint the garage sign, the chemo sessions that stole that laugh away. He'd poured his grief into working on cars, day and night, until the sorrow dulled into a persistent ache. Now, another lost soul was under his roof, stirring up protective instincts he'd nearly forgotten. Somewhere around 3 a.m., a metallic clang jolted him awake. He shot up, adrenaline spiking. The overhead lights were still on, their dull hum unbroken, but the noise had definitely come from outside. Heart pounding, he crept to the side entrance and peered through a small glass window. Visibility was near 0 sheets of rain and darkness. Another clang, closer this time. He thought he saw movement near the fence line. Could be the wind knocking something over, or an animal rummaging. But given Claire's story, he wasn't taking chances. Quietly, he retrieved the shotgun from under the workbench. Double-checking the shells, he eased open the side door. Rain assaulted him immediately, drenching his hair and clothes. He moved along the building's edge, scanning the perimeter. Lightning flashed, revealing only puddles and rusted barrels. Then a flicker of movement near the ditch. Jack raised the shotgun. "Who's there?" No response but the wind. Another lightning flash, and he caught sight of the black SUV's shape in the distance. A silhouette darted behind it. Jack's breath caught. Someone was there. Before he could react, thunder boomed overhead. By the time the rumble passed, the figure was gone. He edged forward, but the mud threatened to swallow his boots. Another flash, nobody visible. Could he have imagined it? Unlikely. He didn't believe in illusions. Muscles tense, he slowly backed toward the garage. He'd found no solid proof besides the scattered footprints in the mud, but he'd seen enough. If Claire was right, more trouble might come. He bolted the door behind him, water streaming down his face, and thought grimly this was only the beginning. Dawn arrived with a pewter sky and the faint stench of ozone. The storm had calmed to a drizzle, leaving everything soaked. Jack was already awake, rummaging in the office for a half-decent breakfast. Protein bars and instant coffee would have to do. He glanced upstairs, wondering if Claire had slept at all. The events of the night replayed in his mind: the battered SUV, bullet holes, footsteps outside. It felt surreal, like a crime drama set had landed in his quiet garage. He stepped outside to survey the damage. Puddles dotted the lot, and the road was slick with runoff. The SUV was still in the ditch, angled precariously, no sign of the figure he'd spotted hours earlier. If that person had come for Claire, they'd left empty-handed. Jack's ex-Marine reflexes told him to remove the SUV quickly, but that also meant risking confrontation or leaving the garage unguarded. The practical side of him realized they needed to avoid drawing suspicion, so he decided to keep quiet and let the vehicle remain where it was for now. Returning inside, he climbed the stairs to check on Claire. He knocked gently on the door. "You decent," a muffled yes came from within. He opened the door to find her sitting on the cot, the sweatshirt sleeves pulled over her hands. The bruises on her wrists looked darker this morning, but she seemed more composed. "Morning," she greeted softly. "Or whatever time it is." Jack handed her a protein bar and a bottle of water. "It's about 7. Storm's tapering off, but it's ugly out there. We should talk about next steps." Claire rubbed her temples. "I know calling the cops is the logical move, but my father has more influence than you can imagine. Even small-town sheriffs might do his bidding if there's enough money or pressure." She paused, swallowing. "What if they label me mentally unstable or a corporate thief? They can spin anything in their favor?" He understood the fear. Big money often twisted the truth. "All right," he said. "We do this another way. I know a guy a few towns over, Jack Winston, an old Marine buddy who's now a private investigator. He might help discreetly." Claire nodded, looking relieved. "But that means we lay low here until I can get in touch with him. No stepping outside unless we have to." Claire forced a thin smile. "Thank you. I'll find a way to repay you." Jack waved her off. "Let's focus on keeping you safe." He turned to head downstairs, but paused. "By the way, last night I saw someone near your SUV. I didn't get a good look, but I'm guessing they weren't here to help. Keep that in mind if you're tempted to go outside." Her face paled. "They must still be looking for me." She stared at her hands. "I can't believe it's come to this, hiding out in a stranger's garage." Jack stepped back, voice gentler. "I'm not just some random stranger. Okay, I'm Jack Morgan, ex-Marine, part-time mechanic, full-time stubborn. We'll figure something out." He gave her a reassuring nod, ignoring the pang in his chest that he might be in over his head. Because once you let someone into your circle of protection, you had to be ready to stand your ground, no matter the cost. The day advanced at a crawl, heavy clouds lingering like a threat that hadn't quite left. After a quick internal debate, Jack decided to open the garage for business as usual, partly to avoid raising suspicion. Brent Hollow thrived on routine. If Jack suddenly closed shop without explanation, it would trigger local gossip. At 9 sharp, he raised the main bay door halfway, letting the world see that Morgan's auto repair was still operational. Claire stayed hidden upstairs, peeking occasionally through a dusty window that overlooked the front lot. She watched as a few regular customers rolled in, mostly older locals needing minor fixes. Jack handled them with his usual calm professionalism, though his eyes kept flicking toward the road, scanning for any suspicious vehicles. Around noon, old Mr. Henderson arrived, complaining about a rattle in his pickup. Jack pretended to concentrate on the engine, but his real focus was on whether anyone followed Henderson in. Inside the loft, Claire paced restlessly. She found an old transistor radio in a box, fiddling with it until she caught a news segment. Her heart lurched hearing the words, "Whitmore Logistics." The announcer spoke about a possible internal shakeup in the corporation, but provided no names or specifics. Sources say that Richard Whitmore's daughter, rumored to be next in line for CEO, is no longer in the picture. The broadcast crackled with static, leaving her to fill in the gaps. She clicked it off, anxiety twisting her stomach. Down below, Jack wrapped up Henderson's repair, wiping sweat from his brow. The rain had caused humidity to spike, making the garage feel like a sauna. As Henderson drove off, Jack heard a honk from the street. He turned to see a sleek silver sedan pulling up a car too refined for Brent Hollow's usual visitors. Tensing, he grabbed a rag to wipe his hands, stepping outside to meet whomever was arriving. A well-dressed man in his 40s emerged, sporting polished shoes that sank into the wet gravel. Jack's instincts roared. "Help you?" he asked, voice guarded. The man introduced himself as Devin Ford, claiming he was just passing through and had car trouble. But Jack noticed the wheels were pristine, no sign of mud or damage. The man's gaze flickered around, scanning the garage interior. "Heard you're the best mechanic in town," he said with an overly casual smile. Jack shrugged. "Playing along? Sure. Let's see what you got." He led Devin to the open bay, popping the hood. The engine looked immaculate, not a speck of dirt. "What's wrong with it?" he asked. Devin hesitated, then mumbled something about a strange noise. Jack suppressed a smirk. He knew a setup when he saw one. Still, Jack pretended to examine a belt, fiddling with the tension for appearances. Meanwhile, Devin strolled around, eyeing the office door, the stairs that led to the loft. Jack had to force himself to remain calm. If Claire was watching from above, she'd see everything. Finally, Devin walked back over. "I'll come back later," he said abruptly. "I need to make a phone call." Then he slid into the driver's seat and pulled away without a backward glance. Jack exhaled slowly, adrenaline spiking. This was no random traveler. He'd practically reeked of corporate cologne. The question was how soon he'd return and whether he was alone. Jack hurried to close the bay door, hating the feeling of being cornered. Once inside, he locked it, heart thudding. He climbed the stairs two at a time to the loft, where he found Claire pacing near the window. She spun around, alarm evident in her wide eyes. "Who was that guy named Devin Ford?" Jack said, raking a hand through his hair. "Claimed he had car trouble. I'm guessing he's connected to your father, or your ex-fiancé, or both." Claire's lips tightened into a thin line, and she nodded. "Devin's an executive aide, part of the inner circle. He's been with my father for years. If he's here, it means they've escalated the search." Jack sighed. He didn't find anything conclusive, but he's suspicious. "We can't just wait around. I need to contact my Marine buddy, Winston, like I mentioned." Claire swallowed, looking out the window. "How do we reach him? Phone lines might still be down from the storm." Jack grimaced. "We can drive to the next town, but that means leaving here, risking being followed." They shared a tense look. Then Claire mustered a calm she probably didn't feel. "I'll do it. Let me go. They're looking for me here, in your place. If we both vanish, it's a dead giveaway. But if I slip out quietly and head to the next town, I can reach Winston from a payphone. You stay. Keep the garage open. Pretend nothing's wrong. They won't expect me to be that bold." Jack shook his head. "No way. You're the target. You step out alone. It's game over. If anything, I go, and you stay hidden." Claire squared her shoulders in a move that reminded Jack of a field officer pushing back at a subordinate. "Jack, you've done enough. I can't let you take more risks on my behalf. Let me do this." They were at an impasse. Finally, a compromise emerged. They would both leave. But separately, Claire would slip out the back, taking Jack's old Chevy truck, while Jack lingered, giving plausible deniability if Devin returned. Once she reached the next town's payphone, she'd contact Winston, arrange a safe meeting, and circle back under cover of night. It was a ragged plan, but under the circumstances, they had few options. Jack dug the keys out of his drawer. "That truck's beat up, but it'll get you there. Just be careful." He explained the route, told her to avoid the main highway, and to stick to back roads. Then, uncharacteristically, he took her hands in his own. "Look, I know we just met, but I can't shake the feeling this is bigger than either of us. I'm trusting you to keep that truck in one piece and yourself alive." Claire gave a shaky smile, eyes bright. "Same goes for you. Don't let that Devin creep push you around." Before she left, she paused in the doorway as if wanting to say something else. Then she simply whispered, "Thank you," and disappeared down the steps. Moments later, Jack heard the rumble of the Chevy's engine. Anxiety twisted in his gut. This plan hinged on luck and good timing, both in short supply since the storm began. Steeling himself, he unlocked the bay door and pretended to resume business as usual, all the while waiting for the next shoe to drop. Hours dragged on in nerve-wracking monotony. Jack kept the garage open, fielding calls from a couple of neighbors who'd heard about an SUV in the ditch. He played dumb, claiming it must have belonged to a traveler who left it behind. Tension coiled in his stomach like a spring. Each time a vehicle slowed near the entrance, his pulse kicked up, expecting Devon or someone worse. The day's punishing humidity lent everything a sticky, oppressive air. Finally, in near dusk, the silver sedan rolled in again. Jack steeled himself, stepping outside to greet Devon Ford with forced civility. "Trouble back?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. Devon shook his head, a practiced smile creeping over his features. "No. I was hoping to speak with you. Mr. Morgan, mind if we talk inside?" Jack hesitated, then gestured for him to follow. They entered the office where Ice and Jack flicked on the overhead light. Devon glanced around, noting the modest decor, old Marine Corps photos, a framed certificate of service, and a picture of Jack with his late wife. Devon took a seat, crossing his legs. "I hear you served in the Marines. My father was in the Air Force." Jack nodded, uninterested in small talk. "You wanted to speak about something." Devon's veneer of politeness hardened. "I'm looking for someone, a woman named Claire Whitmore. She's about early 40s. Dark hair, might appear anxious." He produced a photo from his blazer pocket. Claire looked stunning, poised in corporate attire, worlds away from the disheveled figure who arrived last night. Devon laid it on Jack's desk. "Seen her?" Jack glanced at the photo but kept his face impassive. "No. Can't say I have." Devon pinned him with a sharp gaze. "You sure? Because we tracked her vehicle to about half a mile from here. And we found footprints leading away, possibly toward your shop." Jack shrugged. "Lots of footprints in muddy roads, especially after a storm. People come and go." Devon's nostrils flared slightly. "Mr. Morgan, you strike me as a straightforward man. Claire has mental health struggles. She's off her medication, ran away from responsibilities. We're worried she might harm herself or others. If you see her, you'd be doing the right thing by contacting us immediately." He slipped a business card across the table. The phone number glared back like an unspoken threat. "We pay handsomely for any information," he added softly. Jack eyed the card without picking it up. A surge of anger flickered in his gut. This man was lying, painting Claire as unstable. "I'll keep that in mind," Jack said in a tone that betrayed nothing. Devon studied him a moment longer, then rose. "Thank you for your time. If you reconsider, call." As he left, he paused at the threshold. "You know, small towns can get overshadowed quickly by big influences. I hope you make the smart choice, Mr. Morgan." Jack stood there until the sedan disappeared, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Devon was essentially warning him corporate power could crush a mechanic's little world. Another wave of protectiveness surged. Claire might be risking everything out there, and he had to trust that she would return safely. For now, though, he had to play the part innocent bystander. Unremarkable. The tension felt like a ticking clock, winding louder with each passing minute. Night fell, blanketing the town in a hush that only deepened Jack's worry. He closed up the garage around 9, locking every entrance twice. The drone of cicadas replaced the hammering rain, and the humidity lingered. Clouds still covered the moon, leaving everything dim. He paced the workshop floor, occasionally glancing at the clock on the wall. 9:30, 10, 0:10:15. Claire still wasn't back. He sat behind the desk in the small office, flipping through an old address book to find Winston's number. He'd tried the landline earlier, but it was dead, likely storm-related. He contemplated driving out himself, but that might lead Devon or other watchers to suspect he was involved. Each minute felt excruciating. A small voice whispered in his head, what if Claire was caught? What if they forced her to talk, to reveal he'd helped her? Sometime around 10:45, he dozed off, head slumped against the desk. In his dream, He was back in a desert could have been Iraq hearing the thunder of artillery. Only, it wasn't artillery. It was thunder from the real storm that had hammered Brent Hollow. A distant scream echoed, and he jolted awake, heart racing. He blinked in the darkness, disoriented. Then he heard a faint rap at the garage door. He froze, reaching instinctively for the shotgun he'd stored nearby. Another rap, gentle but persistent. Adrenaline spiked. "Who's there?" he called. A muffled voice. "Jack, it's me." Relief flooded him so hard he almost choked. He unbolted the door to find Claire standing in the weak glow of the overhead light, hair damp with sweat, eyes bloodshot from what looked like a harrowing journey. She staggered inside, hugging a folded paper in her hands. "I did it," she whispered, voice trembling with exhaustion. "I spoke to your friend Winston. He said he'll help, but it won't be easy." Jack ushered her to a chair, scanning her for injuries. Her jeans were torn at the knee, smudged with dirt. "What happened?" he demanded. She exhaled shakily. "I took the back roads like you said, but there was a black SUV at a crossroads. I had to ditch them by turning off near an abandoned farmhouse. It took hours of weaving around side roads to finally reach a payphone." She held out the piece of paper. "Winston said to meet him in Calverton at a diner called The Rusted Spoon tomorrow morning at 10. He'll lay out options, maybe get me safe passage, gather evidence to prove the corruption, but he warned that your garage might be under surveillance." Jack nodded grimly. "Devin visited again, asking about you. He offered money for info." Claire's jaw tightened. Typical. They're smearing me as unstable, trying to buy local cooperation. She looked around, noticing the locked bay door and how the place was in semi-darkness. "I'm sorry you're in this. Maybe I should stay in a motel. Keep you out of it." Jack shook his head. "No, they'd find you easy. Here, at least, I can keep watch." She swallowed hard, exhaustion radiating from every movement. He fetched water and insisted she drink. The raw gratitude in her eyes tugged at him in unexpected ways. Though they'd known each other barely over a day, it felt like they were entwined in something bigger, two people standing against a wave they couldn't afford to let crash. The next morning brought no let-up in tension. Jack decided to keep the garage closed for maintenance, giving them privacy to plan. He and Claire huddled in the office, developing a cautious approach to meet Winston. "I'll drive you there in a different car," Jack said, pointing to an old sedan he had on loan from a customer who couldn't pay for repairs. He'd offered to store it, so it sat in the back, rarely seen. Devin and his goons won't recognize it. Claire's eyes flicked to the window. "If they're watching, how do we leave without them noticing?" Jack rubbed his chin. "We slip out through the side gate, circle around the far block, and take the old farm road. We'll have to do it at dawn, or maybe after dark tonight, so they can't tail us easily." She nodded, biting her lip anxiously. After deciding to leave around 5 a.m. the next day, they spent the remainder of that morning in a restless state. Jack took stock of his finances. If Winston needed money, he'd have to scrape together what little he had. Claire paced, occasionally flipping through local newspapers Jack kept around. She seemed drawn to small-town stories about families, community events, fundraisers. "I always lived in a world of big acquisitions, global expansions," she murmured. Everything was about the next huge deal, the next conference. Reading these local stories, it's grounding. Jack gave a half smile, leaning against the office doorway. "Brent Hollow's small. Some folks find that suffocating, but I like the simplicity. Mostly. Guess that's why I never left after Linda passed." Claire looked up, curiosity in her eyes. "Linda." He exhaled slowly, pressing his lips together. "My wife. She died from cancer 6 years back. I kept this garage running because, well, I didn't know what else to do." A tender quiet fell between them, the weight of shared grief. Claire set down the newspaper and walked over. "I'm sorry, I truly am. Losing someone so close." She hesitated, as if unsure whether comfort would be welcome. Jack forced a small shrug. It's part of life. I guess. Doesn't make it easier, though. They lapsed into silence, each weighed down by their own past. Outside, a car rumbled by, but didn't stop. Jack checked his watch nearly noon. The diner meeting was the next day at 10, meaning they had about 24 hours to kill. Anxious to keep busy, he asked, "Can you handle a wrench?" Claire gave a short laugh. "Barely. But if you want me to learn, I'm game." Thus, the afternoon wore on with Jack showing her how to change an air filter, how to check oil levels, a distraction from the tension that coiled beneath. Occasionally, Claire would glance at the windows, scanning for signs of Devon. Jack would do the same. They knew this was just a lull in the storm. The real confrontation loomed. But for now, turning wrenches and changing filters gave them a fragile sense of normalcy. When evening came, they locked up tight, both mentally preparing for tomorrow's stealthy exit. They barely slept. At first light, Jack nudged Claire awake. She dozed off in the office chair, using a jacket as a makeshift pillow. Still half asleep, she grabbed her shoes and they set into motion the plan they'd so hastily concocted. Jack took a moment to listen at the side door. The town was shrouded in a pale pre-dawn glow, the roads silent except for distant birds chirping. Carefully, they slipped out the back of the garage. Jack wore a dark jacket, Claire a baseball cap pulled low. They darted through the side gate into a narrow alley that ran behind the row of buildings. The damp grass soaked their ankles. Jack's heart hammered. If Devon or another watcher was posted nearby, this was the prime moment to catch them. Halfway down the alley, they reached a locked chain-link fence. Jack knelt, producing bolt cutters from a small satchel. With two firm snips, the chain fell away. Claire squeezed through, trying not to make noise. A dog barked somewhere, and she froze, heart thumping. Jack motioned for her to keep moving. They found the old sedan behind a deserted feed store, exactly where Jack had stashed it the night before. A quick breath of relief passed between them. It hadn't been tampered with. Jack popped the trunk to ensure the spare tire and a small toolkit were there. Then he slid into the driver's seat, motioning Claire to get him back. "In case we pass someone who knows me," he explained. She nodded, crouching in the rear seat, baseball cap pulled down. The sedan coughed to life, sputtering a bit, unmaintained but functional. They eased out onto an empty side street, following the back roads that meandered west. According to Jack's map, it was about a 90-minute drive to Calverton. The plan was to arrive just before Winston's proposed meeting time, hopefully avoiding any tail. If Devon had watchers in Brent Hollow, maybe they wouldn't suspect them leaving so early. As they drove, the landscape shifted from farmland to light industrial areas. The sky brightened to a washed-out blue. No sign of yesterday's storm. Claire kept glancing behind them, each time exhaling tension when no suspicious vehicle came into view. Jack gripped the wheel, every muscle taut. The old sedan rattled over potholes. "Sorry," he muttered. "This thing handles like a brick." Claire managed a soft laugh. "Better than walking." At one point, a black SUV appeared on the horizon, and both of them stiffened. But it passed without incident, and they exhaled collectively. The final stretch of road took them into the outskirts of Calverton, bigger than Brent Hollow, with chain restaurants, motels, and a small downtown area. Jack checked the clock on the dash, 9:47 a.m. Perfect timing. He followed the directions Winston had provided, soon spotting the Rusted Spoon, a low-slung diner with a chipped neon sign. They parked in a back corner of the gravel lot, hidden behind a line of overgrown shrubs. "Stay low," Jack murmured. "We scoped the place first." Claire nodded. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. Outside, life continued as normal people grabbing breakfast, fueling up cars. For Jack and Claire, though, these next minutes could change everything. Stepping out of the sedan, Jack surveyed the parking lot. Maybe a dozen cars, sedans, pickups, nothing too flashy. No silver sedan, no obvious watchers. Still, he motioned for Claire to remain behind him as they approached the diner's entrance. The interior was classic Americana red vinyl booths, a long counter with swivel stools, the scent of frying bacon and fresh coffee permeating the air. A few older locals lingered over eggs and newspapers. Jack scanned each face, searching for Winston. The man was easy to spot once you knew him: tall, broad shoulders, a Marine bearing he never lost. He sat in a corner booth, baseball cap pulled low. Jack and Claire approached carefully. Winston looked up, revealing a lined face and sharp eyes. "Morgan," he said by way of greeting, voice low and gravelly. Jack nodded. "This is Claire." Winston gestured for them to sit, sliding them a menu as cover. "I ordered coffee. Helps us blend in." They settled, and Winston cut straight to the chase. "Jack says you got corporate thugs after you. Ms. Whitmore." Claire nodded, briefly explaining the shady deals, her father's involvement, and how she fled. Winston whistled under his breath. "Whitmore Logistics. That's a giant. Exposing them won't be easy. If they want to discredit you, they'll have resources. You sure you want to go up against them?" Claire's jaw tensed. "I'm not interested in going back to that prison. I'd rather blow it all up. Let the truth come out, than live caged in their lies." Winston slid a folded paper from his jacket. "I got a contact in the FBI who might listen. He owes me a favor, but it's a tightrope walk. If we go to them too soon, your father's lawyers spin it. If we wait, you could end up captured or worse." Jack leaned in. "So what's the plan?" Winston cast a cautious glance around the diner. "First, we get Claire to a safe place. I have a friend's cabin a few hours from here, off-grid. She can stay there while we gather evidence. Second, we document everything she knows: names, deals, any digital footprints. Third, we choose the right time to approach the feds." Claire's shoulders trembled slightly. She'd known this would be complicated, but hearing it laid out made it real. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said quietly. Winston nodded, finishing his coffee. "We'll leave in separate vehicles. Morgan, you stay in Brent Hollow to keep up appearances, make them think Claire never left. Meanwhile, I'll drive her to the cabin." Jack stiffened. He wanted to protect her, but Winston was right. If Jack vanished, it'd be obvious. "That means we might not see each other for a while," Claire murmured. Her eyes flicked to Jack, gratitude and anxiety swirling. "I'll manage," Jack said gruffly, though his gut twisted at the thought of her in danger. "Just do me a favor, don't vanish without me knowing you're safe." Winston checked his watch. "We shouldn't linger. You two say your goodbyes. Then we head out the back. I'll keep a low profile. Morgan, you leave first. Return to your car. Wait a good 10 minutes so it doesn't look obvious." Jack and Claire locked eyes, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They had to trust Winston, but trust was a fragile thread, easily snapped under the weight of this corporate cat-and-mouse game. Jack slid out of the booth, leaving a few bills for the untouched coffee. Claire followed him into a narrow hallway near the restrooms, away from prying eyes. The hum of the diner receded, replaced by the quiet tension of a final moment before they parted. Claire spoke first, voice trembling just enough for him to notice. "Thank you for everything. Jack, I know you risked more than you had to." He shook his head. "If you hadn't crashed near my garage, who knows what might have happened? Maybe it's fate." He attempted a small smile but couldn't hide his worry. "Just keep your head down. Winston's tough, but you gotta stay alert. They'll keep hunting, especially if you're about to blow the whistle on them." Her eyes flicked over his face, as if memorizing every line. "I'll do my best, and once it's safe, I'll let you know where I am. Promise." She lifted a hand, gently resting it on his arm. The contact was brief, filled with more than words could convey: a silent vow that their connection meant something, even if they were strangers days before. Jack found himself leaning closer, wanting to protect her from a world of harm. But Winston's footsteps echoed from the diner, reminding them time was short. Claire stepped back, eyes glistening. "See you soon." Then she turned, heading to the booth where Winston waited. Jack lingered a moment, forcing his composure. He exited through the front, scanning the lot for suspicious vehicles. Nothing. So far, so good. Slipping into the old sedan, he lit the engine and left, heart pounding with each passing mile that took him away from the rusted spoon. 10 minutes later, Winston would lead Claire out the back, ushering her into a different car, whisking her off to an undisclosed cabin. The plan was set, each move carefully timed. Yet dread gnawed at Jack. Calverton's streets passed in a blur, strip malls, gas stations, traffic lights. He forced himself to appear casual, abiding by speed limits, ignoring the swirl of thoughts about Claire's safety. When he reached the outskirts, farmland stretched on both sides. A battered sign welcomed travelers back to Brent Hollow in 15 miles. Jack realized he had no solid guarantee Winston could outsmart corporate mercenaries or that Claire was truly safe. All he had was a name, a phone number, and the hope that Winston's old Marine loyalty would hold strong. By the time he pulled into his own garage lot, dusk was approaching. He parked the sedan behind the building again, careful not to be spotted, then shuffled inside. The place felt emptier than before, like a piece of its soul had left with Claire. Despite the plan, the finality of her absence weighed on him. He pressed a hand to his temple, headache building. He had to continue normal life, fix cars, greet neighbors, watch for Devon. But a new tension coursed through him now, knowing that any slip could sabotage Claire's escape. Back in Brent Hollow, the rumor mill churned. Folks asked about the SUV in the ditch. Some claimed they saw a mysterious woman on Jack's property. The old diner cashier mentioned an out-of-towner with fancy shoes. It was inevitable that whispers would spread. Jack did what he could to quell speculation, shrugging, feigning ignorance, telling neighbors the SUV was gone when he last checked. In truth, the vehicle had mysteriously disappeared overnight, likely towed away by Devon's cohorts. Several days passed with no word from Claire or Winston. Jack woke each morning to the same routine: open the garage, fix what customers brought in, keep an eye on the main road. Tension coiled in his spine. He'd find himself checking the phone line, still static-ridden. Cell service fluctuated. Devon hadn't reappeared, but that only increased Jack's unease. One evening, as he was closing up, he found a small business card slipped under the side door, a stark white rectangle with a single phone number in black text. No name, no logo. Beneath the number, a note read, "We should talk." Jack cursed under his breath, suspecting Devon was making a second move, but calling the number felt like stepping into quicksand. Instead, he slid the card into a drawer and locked it. Later that night, the hum of loneliness returned with a sharper edge. Jack sat in the office, flipping through Linda's old photo album. He'd once believed he wouldn't care for anyone again, at least not deeply. Now, swirling in his mind was the memory of Claire's haunted eyes. He felt protective in a way that stirred old instincts. If Winston needed backup, he'd be there. That same night, fate decided to intervene again, just before midnight, as Jack lay on the makeshift bed in the garage. He heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel outside. He jumped up, adrenaline spiking. This wasn't a neighbor visiting at such an hour. Grabbing the shotgun, he crept to the side door. Peering through the small window, he spotted the silver sedan, headlights off, gliding to a stop. The driver's door opened, and Devon Ford stepped out, accompanied by another man in black. Jack's pulse thundered. They were approaching the entrance quietly, obviously not wanting to alert him. He quickly killed the garage lights. The men tried the main bay door locked. Jack heard muted voices, frustration, possibly planning to force entry. He aimed the shotgun at the door from the inside, breath shallow. If they broke in, it'd be self-defense. But the prospect of gunfire so close to the main street was terrifying. Outside, footsteps scraped on concrete. Then metal clanged a crowbar, prying at the side door. Jack braced himself, finger on the trigger. Suddenly, the men froze as a pair of headlights beamed up the street. Another car was passing by. The intruders scrambled behind the building to hide. Jack seized the moment, swinging the door open. He fired a warning shot into the air, the blast echoing. "Get lost," he roared, voice trembling with controlled fury. In the flash of muzzle flare, he saw Devon's face twisted in anger. They darted back to their sedan, tires squealing as they fled into the night, heart hammering. Jack slammed the door shut, turning the deadbolt. His hands shook. The war he'd tried to leave behind was at his doorstep. Claire might be gone, but her enemies were still hunting, and they just declared open season on him, too. Jack's nerves felt frayed to the bone as the silver sedan's taillights vanished into the moonless dark. For a long minute, he just stood there, shotgun in hand, heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. The reality of this confrontation settled in Devon, and his accomplice weren't just sniffing around, they were ready to break and enter. That meant they'd escalate, especially after the warning shot. He double-checked every lock in the garage and office, then stumbled into the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. His reflection in the mirror showed a man older than his 55 years, lines of worry etched deeper by each passing day. Claire was out of reach, presumably hidden with Winston, and here he was, alone on the front lines. He slid to the floor, back against the sink, letting the cool of the tile ground him. Memories flooded in. He recalled nights in the desert, standing guard under starless skies, adrenaline firing on all cylinders, uncertain if the next second would bring mortar shells. Now that fear surfaced again. Slowly, he steadied his breath. "I can't let them scare me off," he told himself. If he buckled, everything Claire risked would be in vain. With shaky resolve, he got to his feet and moved to the office to check the landline. Still dead, no dial tone. His cell phone had one flickering bar of service, not enough for a stable call. He typed out a brief text to Winston. "Devon came, shot fired, they left. You safe and waited." No immediate reply. A gnawing hunger reminded him he hadn't eaten. He found a stale bagel in the mini fridge, gnawed on it absently. The adrenaline come-down left him exhausted, but he wouldn't allow himself sleep. He dragged a metal chair to the side door, shotgun propped within reach, refusing to be caught off guard again. Hours crawled by, the darkness pressing in. Around 5 a.m., the sky began to lighten. He dozed off for a minute and woke with a jerk to the sound of a truck roaring past outside. Heart hammering, he jumped up, but it was only a neighbor's old pickup, rattling its way down the street. Realizing how on edge he was, he forced himself to brew coffee, though his hands shook pouring water into the machine. In the first rays of dawn, he circled the garage lot, searching for footprints or clues. His warning shot had blown a small crater in the gravel. Beyond that, he found only a set of shoe prints by the side door, likely Devon and his partner. No sign of cameras or tracking devices. That gave him cold comfort. If they wanted in, they'd try another approach next time. Heading back inside, he finally saw his phone blink one new text. He scrambled to open it. Winston's reply, "We're okay. Cabin secure. Keep your head down. We'll be in touch soon." Relief coursed through Jack. Claire was still out there, still safe for now. He exhaled, tension shifting into grim determination. Time to prepare for the next round. Devon would return, and Jack planned to be ready. Over the next 2 days, Brent Hollow buzzed with rumors. Some folks claimed to have heard a gunshot near Jack's garage. Others said they saw a fancy car racing out of town in the wee hours. Jack deflected questions with vague grunts and kept the garage locked whenever possible, only opening briefly for trusted customers. He had no illusions Devon might attempt a less direct tactic, perhaps bribing local authorities or turning townspeople against him. Late one afternoon, Sheriff Donovan paid a visit, a tall, grizzled man in his 60s. Donovan was nearing retirement and didn't much like complications. He removed his hat, stepping inside the garage. "Jack," he greeted quietly. "Mind telling me what happened the other night?" Jack described the attempted break-in, 2 men, presumably armed, who fled when he fired a warning shot. Donovan frowned. "Why didn't you call it in landlines dead, and cell coverage is spotty?" Jack replied. They took off before I could do anything else. Donovan studied him, suspicion creeping into his gaze. A fella named Devin Ford came by my office, claimed you might be harboring a mentally unstable woman. He said she ran off from her family, something about endangering herself. Jack's temper flared. That's bull. That man's lying, and he tried to force entry. If you trust him, you're trusting the wrong side. Donovan gave a non-committal shrug. I'm not taking his word for it, but you fire a weapon in my town, I gotta ask questions. If there's trouble brewing, I prefer to handle it through channels. Jack inhaled slowly. Look, Sheriff, if that man or his pals show up again, they're not here to talk. They're aiming to hurt someone, maybe me. Donovan's gaze flicked to the shotgun in the corner. I see you're prepared. Just remember, the moment bullets fly for real, we got a bigger mess than you can handle alone. Jack nodded, understanding the underlying threat. Donovan left soon after, offering no real reassurance. This visit confirmed that Devin was weaving his web, pressuring the sheriff's office with half-truths. That night, Jack parked his own pickup to block the main bay door, a physical barrier. He also rigged a makeshift alarm using fishing line and old cans around the perimeter, rudimentary but better than nothing. He still hadn't heard more from Winston aside from the brief text. Each passing day hammered home how vulnerable the situation was. If Devin escalated, Jack might be forced into a shootout or into running. He dreaded either scenario. As he dozed in the office chair again, an old memory surfaced, Linda telling him, "You can't save everyone." Jack. At the time, he'd been trying to fix a battered old van for free to help a struggling family. He remembered replying, "Maybe not, but I have to try." That ethos hadn't changed. Now, the person he felt compelled to save was a woman with secrets bigger than any he'd handled. He closed his eyes, picturing Claire's determined face. He had to hold on. She'd risked everything for her freedom, and somehow, they'd carve a path for her to truly break away from the Whitmore shadow. Meanwhile, in a secluded cabin 2 counties away, Claire struggled with her own sense of confinement. The property belonged to Winston's old friend, a reclusive Vietnam veteran named Floyd Abbott. Surrounded by thick pine woods, the cabin offered minimal comforts: an ancient generator, a well, and the dim glow of kerosene lamps at night. Winston had insisted they stay off electronics to avoid leaving any digital trail. Claire appreciated the safety, yet felt stifled by the isolation. She'd grown up in a high-rise penthouse, traveling the globe. Now, her world was a few cramped rooms in the silent forest. Winston came and went, sometimes for hours, gathering intel or making discreet calls. Each time he returned, he brought scraps of news: Devin's stepping up efforts. Heard he tried leaning on local cops. Jack's holding out. Her heart clenched each time Winston mentioned Jack's name. She recalled how he looked that last morning at the diner, worried. Yes, but unwavering. A flicker of warmth spread in her chest, swiftly overshadowed by guilt. She'd pulled him into this lethal game. If anything happened to him, she'd never forgive herself. One afternoon, Winston set a folded newspaper on the small table beside her. "Got this in town," he said quietly. The front page showed a side article about mysterious corporate investigators visiting rural communities. The piece was vague, but it hinted at hush money offers. Claire's gaze locked on a smaller snippet. Local mechanic claims intruder threat, no charges filed. She read the short piece, her stomach twisting. The subtext was clear: Devin was spinning the story to paint Jack as a paranoid crank. This was how they laid groundwork to discredit a potential witness. Frustration gnawed at her. She wanted to do something: testify, speak out, gather proof. But Winston cautioned patience. Rushing out in the open now plays right into their hands. He said, "We need evidence. Real, documented wrongdoing that your father's circle can't dismiss as mental instability." She exhaled, tears burning at her eyes. "Then let me get it. There's a digital archive at Whitmore HQ, files showing funnel accounts for illegal payoffs?" Winston raised an eyebrow. You have access. Claire explained how she had partial codes. The rest were known by an old co-worker she trusted, Ellen Zhu, a mid-level accountant who'd suspected embezzlement. If I can contact Ellen, maybe she can retrieve the data. Winston paced, sending up a swirl of dust from the cabin floor. Do that, and your father's cronies might intercept it. They likely monitor all staff communications. But if we can do it face-to-face or offline somehow, that could be our smoking gun. Hope sparked in Claire's chest. For the first time since she fled, a path toward real justice glimmered. So we lure Ellen out, she said. Somewhere neutral, away from cameras. Winston nodded. I'll handle the logistics, but it's risky. If Devin or your ex-fiancé, Andrew, get wind of it, they'll come down hard. She set her jaw. I'm done hiding. Jack's taking bullets for me figuratively, maybe literally soon. It's time to push back. Winston placed a hand on her shoulder. All right, Ms. Whitmore, let's set a trap for them. If we play this right, we'll get the proof we need, and they'll be the ones running. A plan took shape over the next week. Winston tapped old Marine contacts to quietly pass a message to Ellen Zhu, instructing her to meet at a neutral location, a public library in a mid-sized city called Kinston Falls. It was far enough from Whitmore's corporate offices that chance encounters would be unlikely. The meeting date was set for a Tuesday morning, giving them just enough time to finalize details. If Ellen showed up, it meant she was willing to help and possibly had the code or documents to expose the illegal dealings. If not, they'd have to find another way. Claire's anticipation mounted each passing day. She and Winston spent hours discussing fallback strategies. If Devin or Andrew arrived, Winston would run interference, letting Claire slip out with Ellen's evidence. A single digital file or set of account statements could blow the scandal wide open, proving she wasn't unstable, but rather a whistleblower. Winston insisted on tight security, wearing earpieces, placing a getaway car in an adjacent parking lot, and using multiple exit routes. While Winston and Floyd hammered out these operational details, Claire stole moments to think about Jack. She mulled over sending a message to him, but Winston advised against it. Any communication might be traced, he warned. We can't tip them off about our next move. So she wrote letters she never mailed, full of unspoken gratitude in the hope that when this ended, they could see each other in a world not defined by fear. The morning of the library meeting dawned cold and drizzly. Winston drove, choosing an old station wagon borrowed from Floyd. Claire sat in the back, wearing a simple raincoat and a wig to alter her appearance a short, dark bob. She felt ridiculous but knew the slightest disguise might buy them precious seconds. Her stomach churned with nerves. If Ellen didn't show or had been compromised, they'd be no closer to justice. And if the enemy had discovered their plan, it could end in disaster. At 9:50 a.m., they parked 2 blocks from the library, a concrete building with tall glass windows. Winston's eyes darted around, scanning for suspicious vehicles. All clear so far, he muttered, handing Claire a cheap flip phone. If things go sideways, call me on speed dial 1. I'll be at the cafe next door. She nodded, stepping out into the drizzle, adjusting her wig. The library was relatively quiet inside, just a handful of patrons reading newspapers, college students typing on laptops, and a librarian reorganizing shelves. Claire's breath caught when she recognized Ellen near a reading table. Wearing a beige trench coat, hair tied in a loose bun, their eyes met, relief flooding Claire's chest. She approached, heart thudding. Ellen, she whispered. The accountant stood, hugging her tightly. Claire. Oh my God, I thought you were. She swallowed, tears brimming. Come, let's find a private corner. They moved to a far aisle of dusty reference books. For a moment, all the tension that had built inside Claire threatened to spill over. But she held it together, scanning the space. No sign of watchers. So far, so good. She just prayed Winston was right outside, ready for anything. They sat at a small table nestled between shelves of encyclopedias, hearts pounding so loudly it felt impossible people around them couldn't hear. Ellen opened a slim laptop, glancing around nervously. I used a private VPN. They'll never trace me here, at least I hope not. Claire leaned in. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. But you're the only one I trust. Do you have the ledgers? Ellen nodded, eyes flickering with fear. I did some digging after you disappeared. There are multiple shell companies funneling funds from the main Whitmore accounts to shadow accounts in the Caymans. The amounts are huge, Claire, millions each quarter. Enough to bribe officials, pay off investigators, maybe worse. I compiled it all here. She handed Claire a flash drive. Claire's pulse soared. This was the key to exposing the corruption. My father, she murmured. He must have orchestrated this. And Andrew, too. Ellen nodded. It's likely bigger than them. We might be looking at a wide network politicians, bankers. If we release it without backup, they'll bury us. Claire clenched her jaw, adrenaline spiking. I have an ally, a private investigator with ex-Marine contacts. He's orchestrating a safe approach to the FBI. Ellen breathed a shaky sigh. I'll do anything to help, but if they find out I gave you these files, my career is over or my life. If they're as ruthless as rumored. At that moment, a figure entered the reference section, a man in a dark hoodie, face partially obscured. He paused at the aisle's entrance, scanning the shelves. Claire's heart rate skyrocketed. She ducked lower, signaling Ellen to keep quiet. The man moved closer, footsteps echoing off the tile floor. Claire fumbled for the cheap phone Winston gave her. Speed dial 1. She pressed it, letting it ring silently. If Winston answered, he'd know something was off. They held their breath, pinned behind a stack of books. After a tense few seconds, the man pulled out a volume, flipped through it, then moved on. Oblivious. Claire's shoulders sagged. Maybe just a random visitor. But it was a stark reminder of how precarious their situation was. She turned to Ellen. You need to leave first. Slip out. Get out of town for a while. Can you do that? Ellen's face paled, but she nodded. I'll lay low. I have a cousin in Seattle. I'll figure something out. They stood, trying to appear casual as they exited the aisle. Another quick hug, tears threatening for them both. Then Ellen slipped out a side door, laptop clutched protectively. Claire hurried through the main entrance, scanning for Winston. She spotted him in the cafe across the street, eyes locked on her through the window. She raised the flash drive, and he gave a small nod. Relief surged. They had the evidence. If they could get it to the FBI or a trusted prosecutor, the game would change. She hurried across the crosswalk, rain dotting her coat. Winston stood to meet her at the cafe door. The tension in his expression melted into a grim smile as she showed him the flash drive. But behind that relief lurked the unspoken awareness that they were crossing into a new phase. Once the Whitmore machine realized they had damning evidence, the hunt would escalate. Back in Brent Hollow, Jack faced a more personal escalation. He had reopened the garage on a Thursday morning, trying to cling to normalcy. Midway through changing Mrs. Addison's oil, he noticed an unfamiliar SUV rolling by slowly. It paused outside, tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. Jack tensed, recalling the silver sedan. But this was a different vehicle. After a moment, it drove on, leaving him uncertain if it was a mere coincidence or new watchers. By noon, the sky darkened with storm clouds, echoing the tension in his gut. As he wiped grease from his hands, a phone rang the landline, which had miraculously come back online the day before. Jack grabbed it, half expecting Winston. Instead, an unfamiliar male voice greeted him. Mr. Morgan, this is Andrew Reed. I'm a, friend of Claire's. Jack's hand tightened around the receiver. Andrew, the ex-fiancé. Friend might be a stretch, Jack said coolly. What do you want? Andrew exhaled, the line crackling. I just want to talk. I'm in Brent Hollow. We should meet. Neutral ground. The Redwood Diner at 3 p.m. Jack scowled. He knew Redwood Diner well on the outskirts of town. And if I say no, he asked. A pause. Then Andrew's voice dropped low. Then I can't guarantee your safety, or Claire's. Once we find her. Jack's blood simmered. That sounds like a threat. Andrew's tone hardened. It's not a threat if it's the truth. Be there, or watch everything you've built burn. That's not a metaphor. By the way, the line clicked. Jack stood in stunned silence, phone still pressed to his ear. So, Andrew was in the mix now, playing bully. He checked the clock, 1:15 p.m. Less than 2 hours to decide. Common sense told him to ignore it. Meeting Andrew was walking into a trap. But if he refused, Andrew might make good on that promise. Jack refused to let these punks push him out of his own town. With a grimace, he locked up the garage, fetched the shotgun from the office. He couldn't exactly stroll into the diner armed, but he wasn't leaving it behind. He stashed it in his truck, under a rag near the passenger seat, then drove out. Arriving at the Redwood Diner around 2:50, he parked so the front windows were in full view. He'd have a straight line of sight if trouble erupted. The diner was nearly empty at this hour, just a couple of older gents nursing coffees. Jack slid into a booth, every sense on high alert. At exactly 3 p.m., a sleek black SUV arrived, and Andrew Reed stepped out. Tall, well-groomed, wearing an expensive tailored suit. He entered with an air of entitlement that made Jack's skin crawl. Andrew slid into the booth across from Jack, offering a thin-lipped smile. "Mr. Morgan, thank you for coming. You've made the right choice." Jack glared. "Get to the point. I have work to do." Andrew folded his manicured hands. "Claire's misguided. Her father and I only want her safe. We're prepared to pay you handsomely to reveal her location." Jack bristled, jaw tightening. So that's the game, bribes and intimidation. He folded his arms. "You're barking up the wrong tree." Andrew's face darkened. "Then I'll make this simpler. Tell me where she is, or everything you love becomes collateral. Your garage, your property, your reputation. We'll ruin you." In Andrew's cold gaze, Jack saw the full weight of corporate power, but old defiance flared inside him. "I don't scare easy," he growled. "And I'm not for sale." Andrew leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Not for sale," he echoed with a sneer. "Everyone has a price, or a breaking point." He signaled the waitress for coffee, then resumed his manipulative smile. "Listen, Jack, I know Claire came to you battered and scared. You're a decent man, so you helped. But she's not who you think. She's unstable, and if you continue aiding her, you'll become complicit in serious crimes." Jack's nostrils flared. "She's the one who found out you and her father are up to no good." "Right." Andrew sipped coffee leisurely, ignoring the jab. "We want Claire back. She's a face for the company. Her father misses her. Think of it as a family matter, best left within the family." Jack forced himself to remain calm. "I'm not handing her over. Go ahead, ruin me. Do your worst." He slid out of the booth, but Andrew's next words froze him. "We found some interesting tidbits about your late wife's medical bills. It'd be a shame if certain details got leaked, like how some of those bills went unpaid at the end. Collections could come after you, or your wife's memory might be dragged through the mud." Rage exploded in Jack's chest. His fists clenched. The mention of Linda's name, twisting her final struggles into blackmail, was vile. He nearly lunged across the table but reined it in, remembering the potential for Andrew to have backup. "You slimy," he hissed, voice trembling with fury. Andrew smiled. "Let's avoid ugliness. Just give me a lead on Claire, an email, a phone number, a place. Then you can grieve your wife in peace." Struggling to keep from throwing a punch, Jack spat. "If I ever see you near my property again, I won't miss." He shoved past Andrew, ignoring the curious stares of the diner patrons. Storming outside, he half expected to be ambushed, but Andrew followed at a leisurely pace, merely lighting a cigarette. The black SUV idled, likely with men inside. Jack jumped into his truck, hands shaking, mind reeling. He'd made his stand, but the cost could be high. As he drove away, each breath felt labored, as if the air had thickened. Andrew's threat about Linda's medical debt stung deeper than any physical blow. Could the man actually dig up old paperwork, smear Linda's memory? Possibly awry in the corporate world, forging or twisting documents wasn't far-fetched. Jack's only consolation was that the flash drive Claire had might soon dismantle their hold. But soon wasn't good enough. He took a winding route back to the garage, checking his rear view for tails, none obvious. Once inside, he bolted the doors, trembling with adrenaline. He rummaged through a worn box of Linda's papers, verifying everything had been paid or closed. Even so, old shame of financial struggles surfaced. Andrew had jabbed him where it hurt most. Jack sank onto a stool, pressing his palms against his forehead, fighting off despair. "I'm in this until the end," he told himself. For Claire's sake, for Linda's memory, for the principle of not letting bullies win. That same evening, Winston's battered station wagon rolled up to the cabin. Claire met him at the door, tension etched in her features. "Well," she asked anxiously. He'd driven into a nearby town to connect with his FBI contact using a burner phone. Winston set his hat on the table. "We got a nibble. The Bureau wants a meeting tomorrow, 1 p.m., a rest stop off Highway 29. They'll have an agent in plainclothes. We hand over the flash drive, and they'll consider protective custody for you as a whistleblower." Claire's throat went dry. This was the moment they'd been pushing toward, but fear still lurked. "Are we sure the FBI is clean? My father's influence could reach them?" Winston nodded gravely. "My contact is a friend from my days in security contracting. He swears these agents are trustworthy, but we should expect potential infiltration. We go in cautious." She paced the small living area, heart pounding. Devon's not going to let this slip by. Andrew, either. They'll try something. Winston strapped on a sidearm beneath his jacket. "That's why we're changing vehicles again. Floyd's hooking us up with an old camper van. We'll blend in with the highway crowd, hopefully avoid suspicion." Early the next morning, they loaded a few essentials into the camper van. Claire wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, hair tucked away, her nerves on edge. The drive to Highway 29 was a blur of farmland and scattered towns, each mile heightening the sense of a final stand. She yearned to reach out to Jack, but Winston advised total radio silence until they knew the FBI's stance. At 12:45, they arrived at a modest rest area, a couple of picnic tables, vending machines, and a row of tall pines providing partial cover. Vehicles came and went, families stretching their legs, truckers grabbing coffee. Winston parked near the far end, away from the main foot traffic. They waited, scanning for any sign of watchers. At exactly 1 p.m., a white sedan pulled in. A woman in a denim jacket stepped out, carrying a dog-eared road map. She approached the camper, glancing around discreetly. Winston lowered the window. "Donna?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "You must be Winston." And Claire leaned forward, stomach churning. "Yes." Donna flashed a quick badge under the map, a genuine FBI credential, as far as Claire could tell. "This better be good," Donna murmured. "We don't take on corporate behemoths lightly. Show me." Winston handed over the flash drive in a sealed envelope. Inside is a trove of financial transactions implicating high-level figures in money laundering, bribery, possibly worse. "We want witness protection for Claire." Donna's eyes flicked with urgency. "If this checks out, we'll move fast, but we're not miracle workers. If your father's as well connected as you say, there'll be blowback." Claire nodded, voice tight. "I'll do whatever it takes. People need to know the truth." Donna gave a curt nod. "I'll run this up the chain. We might offer you a safe house. In the meantime, keep low. They won't go down without a fight." She turned to leave, but froze as 3 black SUVs roared into the rest stop, tires squealing. Winston cursed. "They found us," he hissed, scanning for an escape route. Panic surged in Claire's chest. All her nightmares converged in a single moment. The corridor of normal life replaced by the raw prospect of violence erupting in broad daylight. The SUVs swarmed the rest area in a wedge formation, blocking the exit lane. Doors flung open, and men in dark suits spilled out, brandishing weapons that glinted in the early afternoon sun. Panicked civilians scattered, some diving behind their cars, others sprinting toward the vending machines for cover. Claire's heart nearly stopped when she spotted Andrew stepping out of the lead vehicle. Phone pressed to his ear, eyes locked onto the camper van. Donna swore under her breath, fumbling inside her denim jacket for her own sidearm. FBI, she yelled, flashing her badge. Andrew ignored her, raising a hand to signal his men. "That's them," he shouted, voice echoing across the asphalt. Winston gunned the camper's engine, but there was nowhere to go. They were pinned. A wave of dread cascaded through Claire. This rest stop was about to become a battleground. A rapid exchange of shouts erupted. Donna bellowed, "Drop your weapons, FBI," as Andrew's henchmen advanced. One of them fired a warning shot into the air. The echo rattled Claire's nerves. The crowd of bystanders screamed and ducked. Winston pivoted in the driver's seat, glancing at Claire. "Hang on." He slammed the gear into reverse, tires squealing, trying to angle the van around the blockade. More gunshots rang out, bullets pinging off metal trash bins. Donna crouched behind the camper, returning fire. Claire pressed herself flat, fear roaring in her ears. The stench of burnt rubber and hot metal filled the air. She glimpsed Andrew, calm in the chaos, directing his men like a commander on a personal mission. Then she saw a muzzle flash. Donna cried out, dropping behind the rear wheel. Claire's stomach lurched. The agent had been hit, though she was still moving, gritting her teeth. Winston yanked the wheel, knocking aside a picnic bench as he found a narrow gap. "Get down," he roared. Claire braced for a collision. The van scraped against a pine tree but managed to squeeze past the lead SUV. A hail of bullets followed, smashing the back window. Glass rained over Claire. She stifled a scream, refusing to give in to terror. Winston floored the accelerator, and the camper lurched onto the exit ramp, leaving a swirl of smoke. Behind them, Andrew's voice bellowed. After them, engines roared as the SUVs gave chase. Donna, wounded, was out of the immediate fight, forced to take cover. Claire's mind spun in shock. The FBI was compromised, or at least unprepared. Andrew had arrived with paramilitary-like precision. They had to outrun them, or everything was lost. Wind whipped through the shattered window as they careened onto the highway. Traffic was moderate enough vehicles that weaving through at high speed was risky. Winston glanced at the side mirror, face grim. "They're on us." Claire choked on her fear. "Head for the back roads. Somewhere we can lose them." Winston nodded, cutting across 2 lanes, horns blaring. In the mirror, the black SUVs still gained ground. Her heart thundered. She clung to the seat, hair whipping around. If they were caught now, Andrew would forcibly take her. The data might be destroyed, or at least discredited. Then she remembered Donna had the flash drive. If Donna made it out alive, maybe they still had a chance. But that hinged on them surviving this high-speed chase. Sweat coated Winston's brow as he veered onto a narrow rural exit, the camper's engine protesting the sudden speed. Gravel kicked up behind them, peppering the SUVs in a haze of dust. Claire peered back, heart pounding. The lead SUV swerved but stayed close, headlights glaring. "Hang on," Winston barked, as the road twisted sharply through thick pine trees. The camper's tires screeched on the tight curves, threatening to roll if he pushed too hard. Claire's thoughts whipped from terror to strategy. Could they hide? Could they find local law enforcement? But Andrew had outgunned the FBI agent. Small-town cops would fare no better. The only solution was to shake them off. She rummaged through the camper's clutter, finding a toolbox. Her hands trembled as she rummaged for anything that could slow pursuit. Wrenches, a hammer. Then she spotted a flare gun. "Here," she exclaimed, passing it to Winston. He risked a glance. Better than nothing. When the road straightened, Winston braked sharply, forcing the lead SUV to close the gap. Timing it, he yanked the flare gun out the window and fired. The red flare arced into the air, trailing smoke before bouncing off the SUV's hood. The driver swerved violently, momentarily blinded, tires skidding into the dirt shoulder. The second SUV slammed into its rear, setting off a chain reaction that left them entangled. Winston stomped the gas. "That'll buy us time." They barreled down the rural highway, tension thick enough to choke on. Trees blurred. Adrenaline thundered in Claire's veins. After a mile with no sign of the SUVs, Winston finally slowed. "If they disentangle, they'll come after us, but we might have enough lead to vanish." He spotted a logging trail branching off the main road. "We hide there." Steering onto the muddy path, the camper lurched and bounced over ruts. Dense foliage swallowed them, sunlight filtering through pine canopies. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt deafening. For several minutes, they sat in stunned stillness, catching their breath. Claire's hands shook, flecks of glass sparkling in her lap. Winston's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Gradually, birdsong replaced the roar of engines. "We can't stay here forever," Claire whispered. Winston nodded. "Just long enough to see if they pass by. Then we find a safe place to regroup." He reached for his phone, a cheap burner. "No signal. We'll have to move soon," he muttered, "but at least we gave them a slip." Claire forced down panic, remembering the horrifying scene at the rest stop. Andrew's men, the gunfight, Donna lying wounded. She clenched her eyes shut. What if the FBI agent didn't survive? That flash drive was their best hope. But if she died, or if the drive was lost, they were back at square one. Winston gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "One step at a time," he murmured. "We got out alive." She nodded, chest tight. Alive. Yes. But for how long if Andrew could coordinate that ambush? He'd keep coming. She found herself longing for Jack's calm presence. He'd faced his own threats alone, and she wished she could warn him. Tell him the fight had just escalated further than they ever imagined. Jack learned of the rest stop shootout the next morning via a frantic call from Sheriff Donovan. The sheriff's voice shook on the phone as he relayed the basics: multiple gunmen, an FBI agent wounded, suspects still at large. Jack's heart pounded. Was the FBI agent alone, he asked, desperate for any mention of Claire or Winston? Donovan sighed. "Witnesses saw a woman and a man flee in a camper. Might have been your friend Winston. They escaped. Agents in surgery. Stable. But can't talk yet." Jack sagged into a chair, relief mixing with dread. Claire and Winston were alive, but the full force of law enforcement might now descend on them. Confused about who started the firefight, meanwhile, Andrew and Devin were free, likely doubling down on their pursuit. "Thanks for letting me know," Jack muttered. Donovan's frustration was evident. "Wish you'd told me more earlier." "Morgan, now we got a war zone in our backyard." After hanging up, Jack paced the office, mind racing. He had to do something. But what if the FBI considered Claire's group armed fugitives? They might not see her as a whistleblower. If he tried to intervene with Donovan, it could backfire. Then an idea flickered: public exposure. If the local or state media got wind of Andrew's illicit chase, it might pressure the authorities to look deeper. He rummaged for a local reporter's business card, a woman named Tessa Miles who'd once interviewed him for a small feature on veterans. She was no CNN star, but she had a nose for overlooked stories. He dialed her number. After a few rings, Tessa picked up. "Tessa Miles, Daily Compass." Jack inhaled. Hi, Tessa. This is Jack Morgan, from Brent Hollow." A pause. "Oh, the marine mechanic. Right. What's going on?" Jack's voice trembled slightly. "I have a big story for you. Corruption, corporate hit squads, and FBI shootout stuff that sounds crazy. But it's real. I need you to come here. See the evidence. Talk to me off record at first." Tessa hesitated. "That's a lot to drop on a local paper. But color me intrigued." When and where Jack set a meet at his garage after hours. ensuring privacy. She agreed, clearly curious. Hanging up, he wiped sweat from his brow. This was risky. He possessed no direct proof except his testimony and bits from Claire's confession. Yet if Tessa published an investigative piece connecting Whitmore logistics to violence in small-town America, it might flush out more witnesses or tip the scales of public opinion. At 7 p.m., Tessa arrived in a battered sedan, camera bag slung over her shoulder. Jack led her inside. Tension coiled in his gut. She perched on a tool chest, notepad in hand. Okay, Jack, spill. He recounted everything from Claire's nighttime arrival to the gunshot scare, the repeated visits from Devon, and Andrew's threat at the diner. Tessa's pen flew across the page, her expression shifting from skepticism to dawning horror. She asked pointed questions, verifying timelines. Then she flipped the notepad closed. If even half of this is true, it's explosive. You realize you're accusing a powerful corporation of organized crime? Right? Jack nodded, swallowing. I wouldn't risk Linda's memory if it wasn't real. Tessa exhaled. All right, I'll see what I can dig up, but you might be painting a target on both our backs. Jack shrugged, a grim smile forming. My back's already got a target. Might as well aim some sunlight on the truth. Winston and Claire eventually emerged from the logging trail after hours of uneasy waiting. Under cover of twilight, they drove the dented camper to a remote motel, paying cash to avoid a paper trail. An old TV in the musty room blared the news: FBI agent wounded in rest stop shootout. Suspects at large. A blurred photo of Winston's station wagon flashed on screen, identified as a getaway vehicle. Claire clenched her jaw, anger pounding in her temples. The news anchors repeated incomplete facts, implying Winston's group had ambushed law enforcement. Andrew's spin was evident. They're painting us as criminals, she whispered. Winston shut off the TV. If that agent recovers and tells the truth, maybe it'll turn around. Meanwhile, we got to keep moving. They tried calling Donna's number from a payphone, but got no response. Fear stabbed Claire's heart. Did the agent survive? Winston forced calm. If she's stable, the hospital might have confiscated her phone. Let's hope she can eventually validate our story. He studied the battered camper. We need new wheels. This van's too recognizable now. Claire nodded. How do we get them? The answer came via Winston's old Marine buddy, Floyd, who risked meeting them on a lonely stretch of highway after midnight. He arrived in a pickup truck loaded with supplies, swapped plates, fresh paint job, Floyd explained, patting the truck's fender. Won't fool the feds if they run the VIN, but good enough to slip around for a while. Winston clapped Floyd on the shoulder, murmuring thanks. Claire was grateful for the loyalty these men shared, an echo of their service days. After transferring essentials, they torched the camper in a deserted clearing to destroy any forensic traces. The flames cast eerie shadows, fueling Claire's sense of heartbreak. This wasn't the life she chose, ducking bullets, burning vehicles to stay hidden. She yearned to call Jack, to assure him she was alive, to hear his voice, but she couldn't afford that risk. She watched the flames devour their temporary shelter, tears stinging her eyes. Winston placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Soon, he said, voice gruff with compassion. They headed west, deciding to circle back toward Calverton, hoping to glean updates on Donna's condition. The journey stretched through the night, silent miles of farmland and forest. Claire dozed intermittently, nightmares of Andrew's gunmen snapping her awake. At dawn, they passed a lonely gas station. Winston pulled in, fueling up while Claire scanned the local newspaper racks. To her shock, a small headline jumped out: Local mechanic alleges corporate harassment shots fired in Brent Hollow. The piece was by Tessa Miles, referencing Jack Morgan's statements about men from Whitmore Logistics threatening him. Claire's heart soared and sank at once. Jack had gone public. The snippet was short, lacking details, but it named Andrew Reed as a suspect behind intimidation attempts. Winston read over her shoulder. He's risking a lot, Winston muttered, impressed. Claire clutched the paper. If Andrew sees this, he'll be livid. Jack's in more danger. Winston exhaled. But at least it's out there. This might force some scrutiny. We just have to stay alive until the scales tip. Claire nodded, hugging the newspaper to her chest, hope and fear warring inside her. Jack had taken a leap of faith. Now, it was up to them to make it count. In Brent Hollow, the impact of Tessa's article spread like wildfire. Some locals found Jack's story unbelievable. Talk of corporate henchmen and secret conspiracies sounded too much like a TV drama. But others trusted Jack implicitly, recalling his Marine background and honest reputation. Regardless, the piece drew outside attention. A larger regional news station dispatched a crew to investigate. They interviewed residents outside the grocery store, capturing a mix of opinions. Jack, meanwhile, felt the tension mount. He kept the garage running, doing oil changes and brake jobs, but each rumble of a vehicle on the street made him bristle. Andrew or Devon could appear at any moment, furious about the publicity. For 2 days after Tessa's article, nothing happened, no sign of retaliation. Jack suspected they were regrouping, deciding their next move. On the third day, a black SUV rumbled up mid-morning. Jack's heart lurched. Here we go. But when the door opened, it wasn't Andrew or Devon. Out stepped a tall woman in a crisp blazer, District Attorney Margaret Phillips. Jack blinked in surprise. She approached, flanked by 2 plainclothes detectives. "Mr. Morgan," she asked. "I'm DA Phillips from Lexington County. We'd like a word." He guided them into the garage office, offering chairs. She got straight to the point. "I read Ms. Miles's article. I also spoke with the sheriff, who said you reported an attempted break-in. We're investigating alleged corporate wrongdoing. Care to elaborate on what you know?" Jack realized this was a potential lifeline. He carefully recounted the intimidation, Andrew's threats, the suspicious, bullet-riddled SUV. He omitted details about Claire's location, only saying she was a whistleblower with damning evidence. Phillips took copious notes. "Do you have any physical proof, documents, recordings?" Jack shook his head. "Claire had the files, but she's in hiding. She gave them to an FBI agent. Last I heard, that agent was wounded during a shootout." One of the detectives frowned. "You realize how that sounds. We can't move on hearsay." Jack exhaled, frustration boiling. "I get it, but these people nearly killed a federal agent. My word might be all you have until the agent recovers or Claire resurfaces." Phillips pursed her lips. "Understood. We're treading on precarious ground. If we can confirm the FBI agent's statement or find your whistleblower, we could open a formal case. Until then, you watch your back. Mr. Morgan, we suspect Andrew Reed has deep connections." After they left, Jack felt a glimmer of relief and renewed anxiety. The authorities were poking around, but without Claire's direct testimony, it might lead nowhere. Still, it was progress. Someone, besides Tessa, believed him enough to investigate. He locked up the garage early that day, checking his perimeter alarms. The shadows felt heavier, as if the day's events had stirred a hornet's nest. He prayed Claire was close to finishing what she started. The idea that she might never return gnawed at him. He forced it aside, clinging to the hope that once the truth came out, she would find her way back to him. Late that night, Jack was awakened by his cell phone buzzing on the workbench. He scrambled for it, hoping for Winston. Instead, a faint female voice crackled on the line. "Mr. Morgan, this is Agent Donna Wilkes, FBI." Jack's pulse surged. Donna, the wounded agent. "Are you okay?" he asked. She gave a short, grim laugh. "Got a bullet in the shoulder, but I'll live. Listen carefully, I need to talk to you about Claire Whitmore." Jack's heart hammered. "Yes, of course." He heard hushed movement, as if she were speaking from a hospital corridor. "Claire and Winston gave me a flash drive with major evidence against Whitmore Logistics. I turned it over to my superiors, but something stinks. The official line is that my injuries and the rest stop shootout are under review. They're stonewalling me, claiming chain of custody issues. I suspect someone upstairs is stalling. Jack's grip tightened. So, the proof is stuck in some bureaucratic limbo. Basically, Andrew's infiltration might extend higher than we realized. I can't push too hard without risking my career or life. But here's the thing, a state-level DA, Margaret Phillips, is sniffing around. If we get her that flash drive directly, we bypass any compromised feds. She might build a local case that grows big enough to involve honest FBI teams. Jack nodded vigorously, even though she couldn't see him. Yes, she was just here. How do we get her the files? Donna lowered her voice. I have a partial copy. I can't waltz out of this hospital with it too obvious. But if you can meet me somewhere discreet, I'll hand it off. Then you get it to DA Phillips. She's your best bet right now. Excitement warred with fear. Tell me when and where, Jack said. Donna gave instructions: an abandoned rest stop off Route 71 midnight tomorrow, and come alone. No phone track. If Andrew's people realize this is happening, they'll try to intercept. After that, I'm out. I need to vanish until the dust settles. The line clicked. For a moment, Jack just stood there, phone clenched in his hand. The final link to exonerate Claire and nail Andrew's operation was within reach. But it meant stepping onto a stage Andrew watched closely. If he didn't do it, the evidence might stay buried. If he did, he was an open target. Yet Jack already knew he wouldn't back down. He sent a quick text to Tessa Potential. Break, we'll update you soon. Stay close to your phone. The next day was a blur of preparation. Jack packed a go bag with essentials, loading a few personal items, extra shells for the shotgun, a flashlight, rope, and first aid. He arranged for a friend, old Mike, to watch the garage. Family emergency. He lied. Old Mike didn't question him. Jack had built enough goodwill over the years. The plan was to drive out at night, meet Donna in secret, and deliver the data to DA Phillips. If successful, it would be a direct blow to Andrew's stranglehold. Yet dread hollowed his gut, knowing Andrew might have eyes everywhere. This was a gamble with no safety net. Either the truth won out, or it drowned in a hail of bullets. The following midnight found Jack parked at the old rest stop on Route 71, headlights off. The place was deserted, a single dilapidated picnic shelter, rusted trash bins, weeds cracking through the pavement. Clouds obscured the moon, making everything a palette of grays. Clutching his shotgun, he stepped out of the truck, scanning for movement. Crickets chirped, and distant thunder hinted at another approaching storm. Donna's figure emerged from behind the old shelter, a bandage visible at her shoulder. She limped slightly, and Jack felt a pang of guilt. This woman had almost died. She nodded in greeting, her voice low. I told the hospital I was stepping out for fresh air. Can't stay long. Here. She extended a small USB drive enclosed in a plastic bag. Partial extraction of the original files. Enough to incriminate Andrew and some key Whitmore execs. The rest is stuck at the bureau. Phillips can use this as a jumping-off point. Jack took the bag reverently. Thank you. I'll get it to her ASAP. Donna's eyes flicked warily at the shadows. We better hurry. Someone might have followed me. As if on cue, an engine revved in the darkness. Headlights flared, revealing a sleek SUV barreling into the rest area. Jack's stomach clenched. He shoved the USB drive into his jacket, raising the shotgun. Donna cursed, ducking behind a trash bin. The SUV's doors slammed open, and Andrew stepped out, flanked by two armed men. His gaze locked on Jack. You never learn, do you? He sneered. Jack hissed. Stay back. Andrew advanced, weapon in hand. I've had enough of your meddling. Give me that drive, or we finish this here. Thunder growled overhead, the wind picking up. Donna fired a warning shot, making Andrew's men dive for cover. Andrew snarled, returning fire. Bullets pinged off the truck's metal. Jack scrambled behind the hood, adrenaline raging. Another firefight in a lonely rest area. God, not again, he thought. He peered around the fender, aiming the shotgun. Thunder roared. Lightning spiked across the sky. In that searing flash, He spotted Andrew crossing to flank them. Jack squeezed the trigger. The blast tore a chunk of concrete near Andrew's feet, forcing him to lurch back. Donna's shoulder wound hampered her aim, but she managed to wing one of Andrew's goons. The man howled, dropping his gun. Andrew, eyes wild with fury, fired multiple shots, one smashing Jack's windshield. Jack ducked, shards of glass nicking his cheek. They were pinned. Unless they took Andrew out, he'd keep pressing until he got the drive or killed them. Suddenly, headlights blazed from the highway. Another vehicle careened in. For a split second, Jack feared more reinforcements for Andrew, but he recognized the battered station wagon. Winston. The wagon screeched to a halt, and Winston leaped out, rifle in hand, while Claire sprang from the passenger seat, eyes blazing. "Drop it!" "Andrew," she screamed. His shock was evident. He hadn't expected Claire to appear. Winston's rifle barked, forcing Andrew to dive for cover. Claire rushed toward Jack, ignoring the hail of gunfire. In that chaos, Andrew realized he was outnumbered. One of his men lay wounded, the other pinned down, Winston's bullets preventing any movement. The unstoppable advantage Andrew once flaunted fractured under the combined defiance of Jack, Donna, Winston, and Claire. Rain began to fall, as if nature itself couldn't hold back. Andrew cursed loudly, frustration twisting his features. This time, the storm might finally wash away the lies, and the truth had found its defenders, standing united under the thunderous sky. In the aftermath, when the echo of gunfire fades and the storm finally moves on, what remains are the quiet, invisible wounds, scars etched deeply beneath the surface. Reminders of the price paid for truth. Lives were disrupted, faith shaken, innocence lost. Yet something rare and precious was reclaimed, the dignity to stand firm when the world demanded silence. They say courage isn't the absence of fear, but rather the choice to act despite it. In a small town once hidden from scrutiny, ordinary people became heroes not by choice, but necessity. They risked everything, their livelihoods, their freedom, even their lives for a chance at justice. In the quiet spaces left behind, new bonds emerged, forged not just in victory but in shared sacrifice. Now, as the sun rises again over streets that once echoed with danger, there's a sense of peace tempered by caution, freedom reclaimed at great cost, truth standing tall despite efforts to bury it. Yet one lingering thought remains, carried on every whispered breeze and every silent glance exchanged in passing. How far would you go if the fight for what's right knocked on your door, demanding everything you hold dear? Because sometimes, the battles worth fighting aren't chosen, they choose us, calling quietly but insistently from the shadows, until we answer.